I bought this buggy cheap at a salvage auction.
Sold on approval.
Dragged it home and got it running, eventually. I got this buggy running as a way to take a break from other projects. I've got a lot of projects I'm supposed to be working on, but I couldn't get that buggy out of my head. So I'm not going to work on anything I'm supposed to do. Work on this thing instead and finish it up. Now, one thing I did learn in my last video was from comments afterwards. Apparently, this thing looks like a buggy from a video game called Half-Life 2. I had a brief thought of putting all this stuff back on and recreating that buggy. I'd probably get a lot of views, but I'm not doing this to get views. So this pile of stuff is up for grabs. Now, I did get it running, but it seemed to only running on 3 cylinders. A good way to check that is with a heat gun. All the cylinders should be roughly the same temperature. If one is a lot different, it's a problem. I pulled out both plugs. This is cylinder 2 that wasn't firing. This is cylinder 1 that was. I don't see anything obviously wrong with this one, so I'm going to switch them around and see if the problem moves. The previous dead cylinder now fires. And the cylinder that worked doesn't. So I know the problem's the plug. Now we're going to go to the drawer of mini plugs. If I can get it open. There we go. I'm sure I have Volkswagen plugs in here somewhere. Found a plug that looks right. I was about to put it in and I noticed the threads in the end are mangled. Those would have destroyed my head if I actually installed this. So I went back to the dead plug and gave a shot at cleaning it. Got it full of carb cleaner. Wipe off the GoPro a little. Take a wire brush. I'm betting it's shorting internally. If we can clean it, we might be able to fix it. Wipe the GoPro off again. Looks cleaner inside. We'll give it a shot. It fired right up. I let it run for a while, and both cylinders kept going. When the idle went up, I had to drop the adjustment way down, so I knew it was running better. Quick word on lighting things on fire. These exhausts could very easily do it. Normally you hear about spark arresters with things like ATVs because they're air-cooled motors that run hot and can emit carbon sparks and things like that. So are Volkswagen engines. Now on a normal vehicle, the exhaust is long and routes all along and any particles get trapped along the way. This exhaust comes straight from the cylinder right out an open tube. So this is a fire hazard, and that's something we got to worry about here in the desert because I've got stuff here and I don't want it to burn down. So I found these. This is a muffler insert that looks like it'll fit these megaphones. What this does, takes the exhaust gas from the cylinder, shoves it through this tube, where it goes here, and somewhere around, and then goes through this tube, and there, and around, and then out this tube, and finally out the end of the exhaust. So I'll make up for cutting off the extra safety on the vehicle by adding extra safety to the plants around me. Fair trade. That's better. Last time I noticed the steering didn't turn far enough. There's stops added, and there's marks in the body where it looks like the tire rubbed it. So I'm thinking you have an issue where the tire is just too close that way. Looking at it straight this way, we're right around 2 inches from the shock absorber. Now one trick you can do is unbolt these wheels and turn them around. They do fit and give a lot more clearance. We're now up to 5 inches. And I did this once on a buggy I had when I was a teenager, 15, 16 years old. And one hard corner, I watched a tire pass me. It was my inside rear tire. And ending that corner was a little interesting. Now that probably was because I was a teenager and did a lot of dumb things, and the least of which would have been not tightening down lug nuts properly. But I still remember it. So I don't want that to happen again. Gotta brave the parts shed again, because I know I have something that's gonna help me. There it is. Now we just have to get to it. Oh, Cadillac hubcaps. These are adapters. Now we've got a Chevy 5 on 4 3/4 pattern. So added about 1 inch of distance outward. And it's a nice cast aluminum piece with fins, which actually should act like a heat sink for the drum. There's a stock steel wheel. We're a little over 3 inches out. With the new spacer, the wheel turned all the way to the stop has a lot of clearance. So let's adjust this stop. I can go all the way till it's hitting again. But it definitely means I have a lot better turning radius. Last time I had a problem with the front transaxle mount, it was missing. And those are pretty reasonable even new. But then I saw on Marketplace a used one in a pile of parts. So I bought it. Along with some rear mounts. Another rear mount. And everything else the guy was trying to get rid of. Fuel pump, more wheel adapters, new gaskets, front suspension, exhaust bits, tow bar, mufflers, extra deep sump. I won't use it all in this project, but I'm sure this stuff will come in handy eventually. Something is definitely wrong with the shifter. Normally on a Volkswagen you push down, over, backwards to get reverse. And you can push this lever down, but as soon as you push the lever down, it actually moves further away from reverse. I rotate it around here, it's even worse. It won't move side to side at all. Rotate it over here, jammed up again. I think that whole thing needs to come apart for some fixing. While I was working on the shifter, I had a chance to admire the wiring and also the cable work. I might change a few things along the way here. I took the shifter out, right there is where it would have come through, and it would go down into this, and this does the actual shifting. Basically it's a rod that goes back to the transaxle, rotates side to side to select which fork you're going to use, then front to back to do the actual shifting. I was trying to figure out what was wrong with it, and then I noticed these cracks up here. It looks like this thing bottomed out and smashed that bearing upwards, and it could be that this pushed up too far, and now I couldn't actually push it down far enough to release it to do the shifting to reverse. And then I can worry about the transmission mount. Now in the original cars it would have been a rubber mount here. This is solid mounted. That's why I got this front solid mount to mount to it. You can even see the pattern of how it bolted to the front of the transmission. Right there. It bolted to this spot here that's broken clean off. Then the outer bolts bolted to a piece that's welded to this torsion housing, which someone cut away. There's the marks of where it used to be on both sides. So I'm glad I didn't buy this thing new because I really can't use it. There's nothing to bolt it to on either end. So I went and spent way too much money on this. This is a mid-mount that bolts to the center of the transmission, used in drag racing applications, and this holds onto the transmission with 4 bolts, unlike the 2 of the original mount. It's something I could have made, but with all the measurements and getting the hole locations right, I wanted to get one that fit the first time, so I went and bought it. It doesn't fit. Those 2 hole locations are too close together, but it might be close enough to persuade it to go on. But before I do that, I want to see how it's going to mount to these side rails. Now, this is a bolt-on unit. It's supposed to have some snubbers that go up and hit this. I'm going to weld it straight in because I want this to be solid. This is now going to be my new front mount. It's real close to the frame horns here on both sides, but those horns are at a bit of an angle, so I've got a gap on this side. So I'm going to take out a little bit of material. I'm going to line up these bolts as close as I can. Now it fits. In my last video I was wondering about this brake fluid reservoir and the strange disc I found in it. A lot of people recognize this as a Toyota piece and said the disc is supposed to be there. It floats on top of the fluid, and I have 3 reasons given for that. One was that this will float on top and cover up a lot of the surface area so that water in the air will absorb slower into the fluid. Another one was that with a clear reservoir and clear liquid, you could see the line a little bit better. The other one was if it runs low, that hole will cover up the line and then keep air from being sucked in. The only thing I know for sure is I'm going to remove it. I've removed a few of the interior accessories from this buggy. Now I want to see what the real frame looks like. Hopefully I disconnected everything. Not sure what that was. Probably not important. These bolts here, right in fiberglass, that's the only thing that holds the seat belts in. At least they used a washer. Oh, some neat looking seat belts. They were completely ineffective mounted straight to the fiberglass, but they look cool. I was cleaning this body off and getting it ready to paint, and I still wasn't sure what color it should be. Of course, it was originally red. There's a little bit of color under the body bolts, little bits here and there of what used to be the original color, but it's still got a lot of its original sparkle. And that's what made me realize exactly what color I need to paint it. Now, I did several minutes of research before clearing this, and I found that the proper way to do this is to replace the gel coat entirely with actual gel coat. And everyone says the paint is going to peel, and then everyone talked about proper prep and sanding and all that. When I hit that with a hose, the metal flakes started coming off. So I was going to lose it. There's no way I'm sanding that thing. I've never used this stuff before, but it says it works on plastic. It's a primer and a finish. It's clear gloss, and it says it has a 5-year guarantee against peeling. I can always sand it fully and repaint it and do it properly, but I'll never get this original look back, so we're going to try it for now. This is very solid looking stuff on the engine. And then it also looks like it's kind of grown a beard here. I was pushing this thing around the shop and it didn't roll as easily as I thought. Looking, it looks like it has a little bit of toe in. I'm going to check that. Front of the tires, about 47.5. Rear of the tires, 49. So that has 1.5 inches of toe in with the tires pushing against each other. I wonder if that's why there's pipe fittings welded into this tie rod end. They actually wanted to make that one longer to get the tires away from the body so it didn't scrub when it turned. So with all that toe in, it still almost hits the frame. The pressure washer cleaned this up pretty decently. Well enough to notice that's a bright yellow boot, and that is not. But the engine looks a lot better, so that's a bonus. I got an old can of gloss-back Rust-Oleum that's been kicking around. Let's see if it's any good. Oh, hey, there's liquid in there. Yeah, a little thinner, it'll be fine. I am going to filter the paint. That'll get the big chunks out. Like that one. Masking's done, and the wind just started picking up. So I think we're ready to paint. I ran out of paint, but I got most of it. I think I got at least 80% of it. Anything else I can just hit with a rattle can and touch it up. And I finally used up that can of paint that's been kicking around for over a decade. A win for hoarding. I tried repairing this hole with that fiberglass reinforced body filler. It didn't hold up. We're gonna go with something a little bit stronger here. I got my reinforcing plates on both sides, some bolts, and I found some tubing that fits over the bolts and fits inside the holes. I'm gonna sandwich the whole thing together. Make sure everything is smeared full there. Let this dry overnight and clean up the mess tomorrow. This fuel pump didn't work at all. Now, the general wisdom is the stock fuel pump is the best because it produces the low pressure that carb needs. They sell rebuild kits for it, but the rebuild kits are about 40 bucks. That pile of used parts I bought had a fuel pump that doesn't look that old. Makes the right sounds. So I'm gonna put this on and see what happens. I found this battery tie down actually lying on my floor, which means it's something I pulled apart recently, and it fits perfect. So I'm both cleaning and fixing stuff, and recycling. It's like multitasking. Value power is in. This buggy used to have 2 red battery cables. The negative was also red, but by not taking it off and painting over it, I fixed that problem. Now they're color-coded right. When I last worked on this buggy, I already took the carburetor apart and cleaned it, but it didn't work quite right. I know exactly what it was, and I intentionally ignored it. This diaphragm is for the accelerator pump. When you hit the throttle, it opens wide up, a bunch of air goes in, there's not enough fuel. So this little pump sits on the side and squirts a little bit of extra fuel in right when you hit the accelerator pedal. And I intentionally ignored this because I didn't have another one. It's a lot easier to ignore a problem before you know you have it. You can see the rubber is actually cracked in a lot of places. It's full of varnish. It's not really flexible. This is no good. When I looked to buy one of these, I found an entire carburetor rebuild kit, $14.99. And it has that diaphragm in it. This one doesn't have holes and should move freely because it's nice and flexible. Now that looks like it's moving right. Another thing that didn't quite work right was this automatic choke. I didn't take it apart before, but it's time to take it apart now. Now these are fairly simple in their operation. They got an electrical connector, there's a ring that grounds it to the carburetor, and a heating element inside. Then one of these bimetallic springs that when it heats up, it expands. Now one thing I noticed when I took it apart is there is one half moon shaped piece here. It looks like another one broke off. But while I have it apart, I'm going to check how it's working. So we're going to hook a ground, keeping with this vehicle, it's a red ground. And we're going to hook another red to this positive connection here. You can see there's a little spark, so it's getting a connection. Oh, and it's hot. So that is definitely heating up, no problem. I switched the spring to the non-broken side. I'm going to hook this up. See, it's glowing. Oh, that piece is starting to move. So now somewhere in that area is probably going to be full choke. I'm seeing smoke. I think the box is melting, but you get the idea. Now the end of that coil has a hook, which hooks right here, and this actuates the choke. You can rotate this piece wherever you want to set the actual opening point. I've got it just about touching that one side at cold position. Now we're going to put our power on, get that little element going. And there we are, choke's wide open. The air filter that came on this buggy mounted up on top of the roll bar with a long hose. It was well protected from dirt. This is an ideal thing for off-roading. This one is shiny and chrome. I'm going to install this one. I kind of like that. I think clear was the way to go. Let's put the other pieces on and see how the rest looks. This buggy used to have these real big taillights on some big steel brackets. I cut them off. I got it down to the original bracket and found some little lights on eBay pretty cheap, and I like the lower profile. When I took the steering shaft off, the coupler, well, it's not very good. So I had to buy a new steering coupler. Now the steering shaft is in place, I've got to deal with that support bearing. This is the bearing that bolted under here. It's a little bit loose. Now it's a 7/8 shaft. I could buy a 7/8 bearing that looks just like this. It's like 15 bucks plus shipping. So I went to the local hardware store and got a sleeve bushing. And this fits the shaft perfectly. And the outside diameter fits inside that worn out bushing. Just going to give it a quick coat of paint first. A little more of the good stuff here. And that bushing's rebuilt. I need to reinstall these pedals, but the most important one, the throttle pedal, had problems with both the pedal and the cable. So I splurged and bought the complete kit with pedal, cable, sheath for the cable, everything. And it says it's heavy duty. I installed this, and I don't like anything about it. It flops side to side. That's as far forward as it goes. It seems to go back way too far. So I'm going to try spinning this around or doing something because I don't like this. I flipped the entire pedal around and I like the travel here a lot better. I also jammed a flat washer on both sides so we don't have the wobble anymore. The roller was on this side, I flipped it over to this side. Ditched the hardware that came with this for the throttle cable, added some new stuff to space it out a little bit. I think I finally have a pedal that'll work. Now to me, this buggy looks too wide in the back. and too narrow in the front, sort of off balance. And the rear tires are actually smaller than the front tires. I don't think whoever designed this laid-back buggy with that sparkle intended stock front tires. The wider chrome ones are closer, but I still don't think that's it. I'm thinking more like this. I found these rims on eBay for 75 bucks each. They're a 14 by 8 size, and they're the Chevy 5 on 4 3/4 bolt pattern that fits those finned aluminum adapters. I got 2 of these, and they're going to be the rear rims. But I wanted something a little smaller for the front. I found that 7 and 8 inches wide are the ones you can get at a reasonable price. Anything wider or anything narrower gets really expensive. But I definitely wanted something smaller. And then I ran across something I hadn't seen before. This is a brand new slotted mag. Now before you think I went crazy, this rim was much cheaper than that one. This thing was $56, including shipping. This one's the same style and a little bit smaller. This is a 12 by 7 rim meant for a golf cart. Normally I don't go for things by appearance, but this buggy has been in my head ever since I saw that fiberglass body. I've had a vision for what it should be, and I've got to build it in order to get it out of my head. I think this will be just the right look for this vehicle. One problem I have is this rim is obviously shinier than that one. Bought the first thing I saw at the parts store, and see what this does. Apparently, polishing does make an improvement, so I guess it's worthwhile. Well, I'm on a polishing kick here. Now I remember why I don't do shiny. Shiny's a lot of work. The tires that came on this were a 265/50/15. I didn't want to go any bigger in diameter, which is one of the reasons I went with a smaller diameter rim. Now I need a tire that's about the same diameter, pretty wide, and fits a 14-inch rim. Like that one. That is a 26 by 11 by 14, meant for an ATV. The diameter's right, the width is right, the 14-inch rim is right. It's a little more aggressive than I wanted, but it was cheap, under $100 a tire. And the extra traction probably won't hurt. I've got one installed. The height looks just about the same. The width is pretty close, and it moved the tire in a little bit. You can see on this one, you can see a lot of the brake drums sticking out. This one, the brake drum's tucked in. Move this in over an inch, maybe 2 inches, which solves a little bit of the too wide in the back problem. I found a tire for these 12-inch rims that I think will work pretty well. It's another ATV tire, fairly mild tread with a big rib in the center, which might be good for turning. And these are 22 by 8 by 12, which is a good amount of stagger from that rear tire. So I'm happy with these. There is one minor issue. Golf carts have 4 bolts on a 4-inch circle. This wide 5 pattern is completely incompatible, and no one makes an adapter for it. But that's okay, because I got adapters in that used pile of parts I bought. And they're made out of steel, and steel is easy to work with. So we're just going to do a lug nut delete on these. These use a standard press-in stud to hold the wheel on. First you need to unpress them. More specifically, press them the other way. So now I can reuse these for another project. The holes from the old studs have some raised edges from being pressed in. I'm going to grind them flat. Found an old scrap of steel. I've made this with the correct 4-on-4 bolt pattern in the same inside diameter as my old adapters, so I can use the ID to line it up. Got the plate clamped on. If you need to adjust the position on center, this is the time to do it. If I drilled the holes the original size, they'd intersect. But if I go down to a tap drill for a 7/16, they don't. I used the 4 holes in that plate as a pilot hole to drill through the whole thing. We didn't actually intersect any of the old holes. We have all clean metal. If you chuck a tap in tight enough, you can just tap it with the drill press. If not, you can just start the hole and then finish it by hand. Shot a quick coat of paint on these and got some grade 8 bolts. These are a full thread 1.5 inch long bolt. I'm going to put a dab of thread locker right near the end. And the end of the bolt sticks right out. The weld strength doesn't matter. Those threads don't really matter. The whole thing's going to be sandwiched together once you put the wheel on. And the only thing that matters is those grade 8 bolts. Now the original studs that were in this wheel adapter are actually a grade 5. I've got a lot more thread available with a stronger fastener. So these adapters are actually stronger than they were before. Since I went with a smaller size, I had to go buy 7/16 lug nuts. Found these at the local parts store. Pack of 4 was $8. My impact socket doesn't actually fit inside those holes. If I'd planned ahead, I would have gone with a smaller size hex. Learned from my mistakes. Went down to a 3/8 drive. This fits. Now the first thing I want to check is that tire clearance. I've taken off both stops. I've also moved the tires out quite a bit with the adapter and these wider rims, and it's a smaller diameter. Tons of clearance now. So much clearance there, I can set the toe in right. I wasn't able to get the toe in set at all because this tie rod has extension bits of pipe welded in. And even adjusted down all the way, it wasn't even close. Also, this is the tie rod with that bad tie rod end. Luckily, Volkswagen replacement parts are cheap, so a brand new tie rod with new ends. I got a factory style dual reservoir. This actually has 2 separate lines and a divider down the middle. So if one side leaks, the other side still has fluid. There's mounting tabs on the reservoir itself. There's some holes in the fiberglass right there. It looks like this is where the fill cap went. So I was trying to figure out a bracket, popped that in place, and realized that cap holds it in place. It's on there. I don't need a mounting bracket. From an engineering perspective, I desperately want to attach a brace from that suspension point to the front suspension in a straight line on the bottom to triangulate the entire thing. But I'm going to leave it as it was done originally and try it out first. This is the old gas cap that came with this. I cleaned it up a little bit. There's a lot of rust pitting in there. But I have a can of this stuff lying around from an old project. It's a blackout chrome coating. We're going to try this. I kind of like that finish on the gas cap. I already bought wheel polish. There's no way I'm buying chrome polish. This is just a dish soap and water solution I use for mounting tires. We're going to see what that does for the steering wheel. It's cleaning up. Not perfect, but not bad. Quite honestly, I'm amazed how well the steering wheel has aged. I'm sure this thing was stored outside, and I don't see any cracks in that rubber at all. The 500 Superior Performance Products. That was a good wheel. I was planning on reusing this clutch cable because it was working fine. Then I saw the worn out end and realized it's not going to work fine for very long. Then I remembered the spare clutch cable I found in the air filter, so this thing's going in. The clutch cable goes through this flexible tube right here, known as a Bowden tube. This one's in pretty bad shape, and they're cheap, so I got a new one. Now the purpose of this tube, one end connects to the transaxle, the other end connects to the chassis. That way when the transaxle and engine move around a little bit, it doesn't change the cable length. That guides the cable and keeps it all consistent. As long as the other end is mounted to the chassis. This doesn't have a mount. We need to make one. So I found an old quick release air fitting. This looks disposable. It's hollow. Fits decent enough. And has mounting threads. The inside diameter is good here, but right at the end it goes to a smaller diameter. That's better. Now I'm just running a pipe tap into this piece of angle. These threads will be fine for holding stuff. I've got my air fitting installed in the bracket. I fiddled with the position a lot. So I gotta make sure when this is under tension, it doesn't hit the fiberglass body or anything. I think I got enough clearance to the shift rod, so I think that's a good spot. This clutch cable is far too long, And come to find out, it doesn't have the right threads for a nut anyway. I put a piece of heat shrink tubing on it right about where I want it to end. Then I can cut it without it fraying. Small cable clamp. We'll put the bigger ones are on the cable in the bin for next time. Ooh, I got 2 of these little ones. A little bit of free play. A little excessive, but not too bad. And we got a clutch. This is the bushing for the shift coupler. I have 1 good one. I need 2. I've got the outer piece and the inner sleeve. And these would fit together like that. There's just a bit of rubber missing in between the 2. We need to fill that with something sort of adhesive and sort of squishy. In my bin of leftover caulking, I found this. It's some kind of goopy sealant, and it's even black. I can come back and trim this with a razor blade a little bit afterwards. Just going to try to get it kind of close. This is a stock shifter. It's got the lever and the floor plate on the top side, then there's a pivot, and below that there's a spring and a ball on the bottom. There's a cross pin on this ball to keep it from rotating, and a plate to keep it from going into reverse unless you push it down. Let's see how this all works together. That plate has a section that keeps you out of reverse gear. You have first, second, third, fourth. You try to go to reverse, it hits that until you push this lever down. When you push it down, this collar goes below this plate and allows you to move it over into the reverse position. Now we got to make this actually work in the car. The repaired bushing actually seems to be holding up okay. Now we've got the shift rod, and that has this socket end which goes over that ball. That pin goes in that groove to keep the shift lever from rotating. Like that. So I need to make something that holds the shift rod securely. I'm noticing this is a modified version of the original one. You can see the brazing there. It goes to a piece of pipe that goes to the end. This diameter is bigger than this diameter. This is also bigger. So in order to put something on there, I can't slide it on from either end. I've got to put it on in the middle. Now I'm going to push this up until that ball is fully engaged, but not all the way, so I still have some down travel. We will need to push that lever down to get reverse. I took a piece of 1/2-inch plate and tapped 3 holes in it. That's going to take the place of this nut here. Then I 3D printed a U-shaped piece of plastic and drilled a couple holes in a piece of scrap 1/8-inch plate. I sandwiched the 3D printed thing together with the 2 pieces of metal, bolts on either side. That seems pretty decent. Not sure about the strength of the 3D printed stuff, but there's metal all the way around it, so if that stuff does collapse, it'll be sloppy, but I think I should still shift it. The original ignition switch didn't work, but I found an identical replacement. Rock Auto was having them on clearance, so I bought a few of them. I'll use them eventually. This vehicle has a dashboard with 1 opening, so I could fit 1 gauge in it. I was trying to figure out what was most important. Now in a normal vehicle, coolant temperature is very important, because if it gets hot and boils over, you could lose all your coolant. Even after you cool it down, you've got to find more coolant to put back in. But this is air cooled, so that's a non-issue. The other thing is oil pressure. Oil pressure is critical for an engine, but it usually doesn't go away suddenly. And if it does go away suddenly, it means you've got some major problems, possibly a hole in your engine, and a gauge isn't really going to help you then. I did find a pretty cheap oil pressure gauge. It's even a nice liquid-filled one, but it doesn't mount in the dashboard. I put it straight in the block where the oil pressure sender was. Every once in a while I'll get out and check my oil pressure, but I probably don't need to see it while I'm driving. But there's one thing that's critical to these Volkswagen engines, and you can tell it with the gauge. And here's the cooling fan for the engine, driven off that belt that has been on here for at least 20 years, maybe more. This fan belt also drives the generator, so I can use the output of the generator to tell me if that belt is still working, and then the cooling fan. So I'm going to put a voltmeter in there, not because I'm really worried about it charging, but because that'll tell me if my fan stops working. So that's the gauge that's going in here. Since this dashboard is going to be in the weather all the time, this is a marine gauge meant for boat use, so it's meant to get wet. And I got this one cheap because they said there was dust inside the lens. I see a few specks, but it doesn't bother me at all. Working on hooking up these lights, and I found a hole in the roll bar, and I think that is where the wiring is supposed to go. So I'm going to try to fish it through there. There it is. Took another piece of wire and made a small hook on it. Let's see if I can grab one wire with the other wire. There we go. Now I use that guide wire and attach 2 electrical wires to it. But one thing I do is I band one of them. In this case I use black, but you can use different color electrical tapes. It's kind of like adding a stripe to the wire. You just have to do it on both ends. Black is low beam, red is high beam. So I'm going to do red with the black stripe on black and red on red. And the band tells me which one is which over here. I thought twice about my red on red. I added a yellow band to this red one, because someday this might become a turn signal. On the flat 4 trailer connector, yellow is usually the left-hand signal light, and green is the right-hand signal light. So I'm going to band these and leave them down there with the right colors on them. And that way, rather than leaving a problem, I'll leave future me a solution. Now this buggy looked like the front end was kind of unfinished. It did have headlights here that I cut off. There's a piece of square tubing welded to the beam here, and that goes across, and then it was cut up and then badly welded to the same beam up a little higher. And in the middle of that was attached a piece of pipe, which is squished down at the end, some nice lumps of weld there, and a bunch of bolts sticking out. But they didn't really make it any better. I bent a couple pieces of 1-inch square tube and tacked a straight on there. And I think I can attach this here. I didn't quite go 90 degrees, so this whole thing will have a little bit of a slope to it. Hopefully it'll kind of blend together. This is a leftover of that scrap piece I made the wheel adapters out of. This is the base for the headlight. That looks just about perfect. I just used the washer itself as a guide. Something like that should do. I made a few straight cuts with a saw to get it close. Got a leftover piece of sheet metal. Just get rid of the cobwebs a little bit. 20 gauge, almost exactly the right size. I added a bend in one end, almost cut off the other end. We'll just take that the rest of the way here. I'm going to use these braces and roll that sheet metal around them. In order to keep it flat, I welded all along the front edge, because that's just a flat sheet, and the angle bend here should keep it a little more rigid. So now I can roll it along and add tack welds as I go. Something like that. The curve turned out pretty nice. Where there was a gap, I had to do a few extra tacks, but now I'm going to use the magic weld eraser. After a coat of paint, now we have a light bracket. Kind of smooths out the front end a little bit, makes it a little less disjointed, and highlights the fact that this bumper isn't actually square. That bracket's longer than that one. So I might have to fix that someday. But for now, I'm ignoring it. We're going to add a few more distractions up here. I found some metallic red vinyl left over from the Race Jeep project. That just seems right for the front of a Volkswagen. These are the old headlight housings. I want to reinstall them, but right now they won't match the vehicle. I want them to look a little shinier. This stuff looks shiny. I need some seats for this buggy. My plan was to make some seats by copying the original ones that were here and reproducing them. I have leftover marine vinyl from another project in both white and gray. But both of those colors just seemed too boring. So I went on eBay to see if I could find something more interesting. And I found these boat seats for 51 bucks a piece. Now these are a two-piece design. They have a hinge that pivots the top and the bottom, and they come disassembled in a box, which is perfect for me. The first thing I'm going to do is cut up this hinge. My modified hinges bolted right in. Not only are the seat backs mounted, I could fold them down, get to my battery, and in the sun, that bottom seat won't get too hot. Speaking of the bottom seat, I have to mount that. There's threaded inserts and 4 bolt holes in the middle, so I want to use those to hold it with. I put the mounting bolts in and put a dab of grease on them. And now, I'm going to very carefully set this in the right position. Take it off. And now I have a little lump of grease where my mounting hole is. I just have to drill through the grease. I know there's a grease blob right about here, but I don't see it particularly well. So I'm going to take some of the old shavings. I don't know if you can see it from there, but the fiberglass dust highlighted the tiny bit of grease that's there. Passenger side seat went smoothly. Now it's on to the driver's side, which doesn't fit. Apparently, that side of the tub is wider. There's absolutely no way this is going to fit, at least not as it is. Now, this vinyl upholstery is just stapled to the base. So I removed the staples along one side. And now I'm going to trim to fit. Used a sander and scissors to kind of round the corner over again. And now it fits. I got it stapled back together. As you can see, there's a lot of excess. The nice seams don't fit nice anymore. It's a bit lumpy. All the lumpiness are this side, right next to the fiberglass. That covers it up pretty well. I got all the wiring straightened out, in-wire looms. I even reused the wood screw for the charging system, and it's got a key switch in the original location. But then I added some extra up here. This switch does control everything normally. It seems like it'd be hard to get to in an emergency. So I wired in this switch on the dash, which has to be up for the ignition to be on. So you can kill the engine right there. I got the voltmeter in, and a switch for the headlights. The headlight switch got a little complicated to use a double throw switch. So off is in the center, high beam, and then low beam. I wanted the taillights to come on in both high and low beam. So I used a double pole switch so the taillights can go on in either direction and it doesn't affect the headlights. Now I've got a big mass of wiring here I got to cover up. That looks small enough to fit in the 3D printer. So I think I'm going to make a cover for it. I modeled up a piece that looks like it'll cover everything. People have asked how I use 20-year-old software on a modern computer. I'm running a virtual machine that has XP inside it. Then I sliced it up, and I printed failure. This actually started binding up overnight, and each layer shifted over and over as it went to do that. After I got the axes lubricated, it worked perfectly. So I ran this part for another 8.5 hours until it ran out of filament, with about 1/8 of an inch of the build to go. At least this will be a good test piece to see how it'll fit. This original dash was held on with a fastener, bolting this little piece of sheet to this piece of plate, bolted in the back. So I designed in 2 mounting holes that should use those. I'm putting bolts through this, but I'm also putting a nut on them. That way this area here will sandwich those two together like it was supposed to be. Apparently I didn't get my measurements quite right. The whole thing kind of twisted this way as it went in. So now it's a good thing that it didn't finish, because I want to reprint it again with some minor changes and maybe a different color. For now, it covers up those wires and it's better than it was. I think I have the pump hooked up backwards. Now I can finally get into reverse. And the brakes work pretty well. I had to test the turning radius, and it did a lot better than it did before. Then I had to repeat the test a few times to make sure I got the same results. I took it to a bigger area for a little more testing. suspension works well. You barely notice stuff like this. Almost 20 psi at idle. Apparently the headlight realigned itself somewhere along the way. Gonna have to tighten that down a little more. I found a few minor issues when I was out in the desert. First of which is reverse gear. It pops out of it pretty regularly. Hopefully that's just a linkage issue and I can adjust it away. That brand new master cylinder installed in the last video, it's leaking right out the front. Also, I had a couple times where it felt like I was running low on fuel. I never actually cleaned that tank. I think an actual proper cleaning would probably help. I bet I'd knock some junk loose. But overall, I'm really happy with this. I bought an unusually high number of parts for it new. Including the purchase price of the vehicle, I'm over $1,000 into it. But considering what it looked like before, I think it was well worth it. The next thing I've got to do is find a different place to drive it. There's too much stuff underneath to get hit and brush and rocks, and adding skid plates would add a lot of weight, which would kind of ruin the idea of it. Right now the thing's real light and maneuverable, basically a sports car for the dirt, and I don't want to change that. I think when this buggy was designed, they intended it to be on the beach. So if you have any suggestions for a beach I could drive this thing on, I'd love to hear them. Please leave a comment, because this thing is a whole lot of fun to drive. Hope you're having fun too, and we'll see you next time. I got more filament. New version of the dashboard. I moved my locating holes, added a lip so this plate actually fits inside, and that gives it a better finished edge. A piece of threaded rod with a nut going either direction to hold both pieces rigid and where they should be. Another acorn nut to hold it in place. And that is a red and black silk filament. I kind of like it.